Do you crave better self esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. Last episode, we talked about how to develop a healthy perspective as we navigate stressful situations. In previous episodes before this, we explored how to map out our survival guide and tap into our inner wilderness wisdom to live with improved happiness and fulfillment. Today's episode builds on these survival guide concepts, this time moving into identifying who those foes and triggers are in your camp. That's right, there will be enemies in different shapes and forms that join you in your wilderness. It's up to you to manage this wilderness. That's why your quality of life depends on how well you get to know these enemies to beat them at their own game. I remember how defeating life felt before I learned this lesson, and I can't wait to share what I learned and how I now face and beat the enemies in my camp. In this episode, you'll gain an insider look at what it means to have enemies in your camp. You'll learn how some of my own training and experiences equip me to be a powerful warrior when it comes to keeping my camp safe. And you'll also gain some creative strategies to try in your own interactions and experiences. Also, if you haven't joined my free Facebook community, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood group, I encourage you to do so. It's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community. Also, over the next week, I'm running a free giveaway for a 1 hour coaching session with me for everybody who just selects one of the answers to the poll that's pinned at the top of the page. Okay, so if you're boldly ready to step into a life with improved happiness and confidence, turn off all those distractions running in the background so you can supercharge your inner healing journey with this next episode. And welcome back to all of my listeners already walking with me down this restoration path. So last episode, I shared how to apply some literary concepts to help you gain perspective clarity in interactions. Today, I'm going to use some rhetorical strategies. So the same concept that I apply in my teaching life and my professional life, I'm going to bring you some of these strategies that literally and figuratively apply to our interactions with others and how we can optimally thrive in these interactions. And if you are looking to get some tea on some sketchy situations that have happened in my own life where I draw all this inspiration from, you're going to love this episode as I spill the dirty details of some scandalous interactions that my husband and I have had with governmental agencies that are supposed to be there to protect us and keep us safe. But in other instances that I'm also going to share with you, that wasn't necessarily the case, which is why then we have to become very good stewards of our own lives and managing our own wilderness and keeping that camp safe. So there's a proverb I live by a Chinese philosopher and military general named Sun Tzu, and it is, to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. So the goal of a conflict is to overcome your opponent and gain control of the situation. I know we can't always use war interaction or consider everybody in every situation or interaction that we have as a foe or an enemy, but these same principles apply to all of our interactions with others because you're in a situation where you can only control yourself. You can try to, steer the situation in particular areas, and you can have an end desire in mind, and you can do all the necessary work to do that. But you also have individuals who have their own will and their own, set of morals, beliefs, standards, motives, and things that they expect to get out of things. Some people come in peace and some people don't come in peace. And in all of these situations, though, you can really apply these same principles that this saying encompasses. And you see this philosophy throughout a lot of biblical and mythological texts as well.
But the goal here is to maintain control of yourself and to steer the interaction toward that desired outcome. So when you keep thinking about those two things, then it helps you keep everything else in order. So to do this, we must adopt that get in the mind of, kind of like what I talked about last episode, where you are getting in the mind of your characters. So in the same regard, you're adopting that literary strategy where you're getting in the mind of this individual, and you're doing so to identify and predict their thoughts and their actions. That is literally how you do this thing. We must understand ourselves also to the very core, and then we must also begin to try to understand the people on the opposite side of the situation with just as great of detail and the same level of intimacy as we understand ourselves. There's no way around it. There's no way to cut corners. Obviously, this will play out differently when you are dealing with people who you know and you see on a regular basis versus people who you might be meeting for the first time or only seeing in a one-time situation. So, as you're seeking to understand these other individuals in a situation, you really are looking at the rhetorical situation. I cover this a lot in my writing classes and when I'm working with all different types of writing students at what doesn't matter what genre they're working in. So you really have to be thinking about what are their motives and the purpose here at play in this situation. Like we talked about last week, what brings you together for this situation? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this individual or of the elements of the situation? What are their biases, their beliefs, their values? What type of credibility and backstory do they bring to this situation? Can we analyze past actions to predict future ones? You know, these are some of the things that give us intel and give us knowledge about the individual. All this knowledge is also helpful to develop and use these effective strategies when you're interacting that, you know, when you think about the war concept, that this is how one side can anticipate the next move and then they can exploit the weaknesses of the other individuals and overtake them and win the battle at hand, or they can, you know, drive them back. And then the same is true in athletics when you think about, you know, teams play with an offensive and a defensive. You're always studying that, you know, the offensive to know how to build your defense. So you have to understand, how does your competitor compete? How do they play the game? What are their tools and tricks, the things that they go to over and over and over again? They have a playbook, and you're trying to learn that playbook because someone's going to hand it to you and say, "Oh, here are all of our plays." But you can go back to previous video clippings. We used to do this all the time in cheer and dance, and also in track and in volleyball. Our coaches would bring these recordings from previous competitions and track meets, and we would watch our competitors, and we would often watch ourselves also. So we would do the same thing with ourselves. We would get to see ourselves from a different perspective, like an outsider looking in, because we can't see our stride when we're, you know, we can feel it, but we can't see what does it look like. Is it really playing out the way that we've practiced it and our coach has taught us to do it? But when we're watching a video, we can see that. When we're watching how does our stride work compared to the person next to us, we can then see what is more effective in, you know, in this particular competition. The same is also true in the business world. You think about how you study your competitors and their products and how they're marketing those products and what their clientele is, so that you have a competitive advantage, so that you can also be at that table and, you know, have people considering you also when they're looking for this service or this particular product. And one of the things that is really key in all of these different situations is timing and position. So we have to have the right timing in order to implement certain strategies for them to even be effective. And we have to use those strategies with accuracy if we're going to strike and we're going to hit the target. So these are all things that you have to be thinking about when you are looking at these situations. You know, so the first thing that I want to talk about with you is a little bit of tea that I want to share with you. And I'm going to share with you, you know, when I was thinking about what kind of story or stories I wanted to share with you, I kind of had a chain of stories that were kind of building on each other with the same cast of characters, mostly foundationally the same cast of characters. And then that led me to a project that I'm working on right now that is in the same ballpark. And so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But so the first story that I want to share with you is this is the first instance where someone had made false accusations against us in our business, and they were trying to criminalize something that wasn't considered criminal. But my husband had had an altercation with one of the chief of police, not one of the police officers, but the chief of police years ago. He said something like, should try this instead because what you're doing isn't working. And the way he delivered it rubbed him the wrong way. And like that was like starting off a relationship in a small town on the wrong foot. And this chief and his staff always had like a motive to just get my husband on something. They were always like, let's just teach this little punk a lesson. And it was like constantly running into them, just stupid stuff. So now fast forward, here comes this situation where this individual tries to bring false accusations against us, and they're going to run with it. And there's things that they also didn't know going into the situation, which was this individual tried to blackmail us to get money out of us. And then she had an attorney tell her, well, if you can get a criminal conviction, it'll make a civil case and all these other, things come into play for you, and you'll make, a lot more money than what you're trying to get out of them. So she got a lot of this information and was trying it in every possible capacity to get something to stick. Okay, so before I can even get into the situation itself, I got to give you a little bit more backstory about the rhetorical situation stuff that I started to build on a couple minutes ago. The reality is I'm a communications expert. That's what I do for a living. I do it in my professional life. So I'm constantly looking at, developing, helping people edit different texts and different communications that are argument-based. So they're built around, there's multiple perspectives, multiple sides, and everything has to be sound. I have decades in this field. I'm trained, I have the experience, and I practice it for a living, helping other people accomplish these same strategies. So the thing I spend a lot of time with is thinking about and wrestling with the rhetorical situation. So this really came in handy for that first court case when we had these false charges brought against us. And I had several agencies and several individuals sending me stuff and requesting stuff from us and trying to get this set with the system and that set with the system, and getting all of these contradictory statements from the plaintiff, for lack of better words. And I immediately started to piece particular things together. That was the start. So I used all of my communications expertise, and this was at the beginning of my career in this industry. I still had enough of that knowledge to know, okay, let me read the situation. Let me read the characters involved. So I knew enough about the police department and what some of their motives and antics were. I knew a lot about this individual that we're calling the plaintiff and what her antics were and what some of her motives were. And I had enough of those statements from the different agencies to realize that she didn't even know what her story was, and she really didn't know what she wanted out of the situation, and she was all over the place. And it was bogus. It wasn't true. And that's what gave me the faith and the hope that, okay, I can get through this. I can help get us through this because it's not true. And it doesn't matter what all these antics are. I cannot lose focus on the fact that these are false allegations. These are sketchy plans that everybody on the opposite side have. And as long as I can keep my focus on that, it's going to help me uncover all of these rhetorical elements that I need to properly see and then understand the situation so that I can respond and act accordingly. And this is the same concept and philosophy that I used when I started dealing with our attorney. The first thing that I started with was my faith. I turned to my faith and, oh my God, what do you want me to do? How is this even happening? You think about how you're really good to an individual and how is this happening to you despite being so good to this individual? And you have no answers in the moment. You just, now you're in survival mode and you have to figure out how to navigate this. And, it feels like life is falling apart all around you. And you also have to go on with your everyday life. My kids were smaller, so I had to just keep my family going, my household going, while I was also dealing with all of this stuff and also still running our business. And so it was a lot of different things, moving parts all at the same time. But I also had to bring my A game to the situation. I couldn't, say, oh, I'll just whatever. You can't just hire an attorney. Attorneys work with you. They don't work for you, they work with you. So you really have to get in there in the trenches and help them essentially plan out your defense. And you're giving them all of the dialogue, all of the questions. They're bringing their level of expertise. They know the system, they know the laws. And so you're coming together. You're the expert of your situation, and they're the expert of the law and how this whole judicial system works. So you come together as a team and you put your kind of like brain power together. And so you have to have brain power, you have to have knowledge of the whole situation. And whatever you don't have knowledge of, you've got to go out there and gain it. So you have to use these strategies to go out there and gain it. And so as we move forward through this, my attorney's educating me on also the law and the framework that we're working within. I start to map out our defense. I start to map out a lot of different things, and getting other individuals together who are going to testify to the effect. And as we start working toward trial, there's all this pretrial stuff. And so if you've never been familiar with the legal system, the pretrial stage is a joke. It is the part where the prosecution continues to badger and try to wear you down to take some kind of plea deal. They literally want to criminalize everyone. They, in their head, think that they're doing justice, win at all costs. They have different motives for why they want to win at all costs. And those motives don't always have to do with whether or not the individuals they're dealing with are guilty or innocent. They're trying to move things through, and it's to their advantage if you have some type of a record. Because then, if something bigger comes along next time, they have this record against you or previous things that have happened that you've taken the plea on, which, let me just say, when you take a plea deal, you're signing that you are guilty. So in those instances where you aren't guilty or you're not 100% guilty of the thing that they're asking you to plead on, don't do it. Why would you lie? And that's where my faith came in. I just kept thinking, why the heck would we lie to get out of trouble? God, whose all of his principles are based on operating in the truth and having faith that the truth will show itself and that the light will always come and outshine in the darkness. Why would I cave and operate in fear to think, oh, they're going to get me? They have no case. They have no real evidence because they would have to fabricate stuff. And even fabricating details, they don't have the physical evidence that they need in order to show us as guilty. And I know we're not guilty. So I just kept, coming to these pretrial meetings and saying, that sounds like a you problem. When the prosecution would tell our attorney, well, the judge doesn't really like to hear these types of trials. She prefers that we work these things out in this pretrial stage. And I would just keep saying, that sounds like a you problem because you don't have a case. We're not going to admit to something we didn't do to get out of trouble. Like if that's what I have to do to get out of trouble, then my whole foundation of faith is a lie. And I'm not willing to accept that because I live a radically supernatural life where so many amazing things happen over and over and over again. But here I found myself where God was saying, I'm not going to just deliver you out of this. I'm not going to just make this go away, but you have all the skills and all the brain power to work through this. So you're going to do the hard work and you're going to work through this. And everybody who's involved in this situation is going to learn something. And it isn't up to me to figure out how God's justice works or how the world's or the universe's justice works or what lessons other people are going to learn. I'm not out there being like, oh, you need to learn this and you need to learn that. Even if I'm like, oh my God, this person needs to learn this. That's not what my motive is going into it. My motive is being as informed and equipped as I can to win in these situations, to get that outcome that I desire. And in these court cases, it was ultimately to win the case, to have the case dismissed. And, if the case wasn't dismissed, to actually win in trial. And that's what I did. every time. And how I did that was I mapped out this defense for the attorney. So, working this whole year leading up to the trial felt like a nightmare. Again, think about it. It was almost a year before we actually finally got to go to trial before the judge. And you're still living in real time and dealing with all this garbage that comes along with this type of a case, which I'll spare you of all that to just say that, like, we're dealing with it. We're in the messy middle of this. We're in the trenches, clogging through the mud day after day after day. Finally, a year later, we get to go to court. And as we're preparing for the trial, I pull out this rhetorical situation thing and I map out, okay, this is the questions you need to ask. This is the order you need to ask them. And if she answers this or if he answers, because there were multiple people who were going to be taking the stand, this is what you follow up with, depending on if it was this way or that way. So I plan this all out. And to do that, I had to get in there and break down all of these different elements. What's at play? What are the motives? What are the biases? What is going to lead them chasing their own tail in their own folly, in their own lies? And sometimes you can kind of laugh about that stuff because it is kind of funny when you understand how this works and you can get somebody who's acting devious to just start babbling and chasing their tail and on repeat, constant repeat, because they're lying. They don't even know how to continue the story because they haven't thought it through all the way. So when you start to come in and actually apply logic and the right kind of comments and questions, then you stump them. You start to mess them up. And of course, they're just trying to get you stumped so that you're just like, okay, what do you want? Or okay, I admit defeat. And we can't go away so easily all the time in our regular interactions. Sometimes we do have to go away. I'm not saying you have to argue with people all the time. I'm saying these strategies are really effective. And when you follow them out to the end of a situation, when it's important that you finish that situation and not just be like, I gotta get out of here. You're impossible. There will be those situations where you either have to or you need to stay till the end. And these are the situations that I'm trying to appeal to you and inspire you to use this thinking and these actions to navigate these spaces. So the other thing is when you can map all this out and you know what motivates people, you know how to provoke them in a particular way. And so in this instance, I knew the lie and I knew I had three different stories that this individual had given three different agencies, and they were radically different details in them. And I know that they were lies because they involved me, and I'm there. I have a very good memory. It's part of my professional expertise is being able to have that strong memory and to go back and remember the finite details of things. And not only did not one of these three stories line up with my recollection of events, she started giving a fourth version on the stand. And I anticipated that because, again, I have all this knowledge. It's kind of easy math. When you know somebody's already given three different stories, then you can ask questions that you know where the story starts to get a little messy. You can ask those questions. And I knew this individual was she's not poised. She has a really bad attitude. And I knew that if he asked the right questions, he would provoke that. I didn't realize that she would so quickly become a rebellious, almost look like a teenager on the stand where the judge had to be like, enough, like rapping her gavel in enough. You will not act that way in my court. You will answer the questions. And the more that the judge started to tell her she needed to act respectfully, and then the attorney was asking the more pointed, very specific questions, leading her down this very intentional path, she lost it so many times that the judge just dismissed the case because she could also see, A, this individual has a vendetta and this vindictiveness has no place in a criminal court of law. And she was very upset with the amount of resources and things that were put into this case. And she asked all of counsel after she dismissed the case and she lost her patience. She said, all of you back in my chambers. And because my attorney was part of that group, he got to be back there when she read them the riot act. And that's kind of satisfying as well because they put us through hell for an entire year and then some afterward. But they kind of came back with a vengeance, like always looking for like, okay, what's the next thing we can get these guys on? And it just became a very frustrating thing because you want to just be yourself in a small town and just do your good, do your everyday, and not have to be looking over your back. Like, is somebody in a position of power going to abuse that position of power to get back at you or to teach you a lesson or to put you in line? You got to get in line. And so it was amazing to come out of that situation with, a win, actually having to go into trial. And something I want to share also, that when we were going into trial, I, the whole year, I was like on this really go deeper in my faith kind of walk. So prior to this instance even happening, I was doing this like Bible study where I was trying to just get like, let me just supercharge my spiritual life. And I was in it. I was in the middle of that when this happened. And what happened when we had to start dealing with the criminal aspects of this case was that it drove me deeper into my faith. Sometimes you can have situations where they start to happen, and maybe the timing catches you at a more vulnerable part, and you're like, okay, it makes you fall away from that because you're like, okay, right, this isn't working. But in my instance, I was already in the heart of it, and I was feeling the supernatural elements of walking in faith and strengthening my spiritual life. And then going through this, I was bringing my Bible like to court with me and read, like I would open it up, it would just fall open on my lap, and it would be like a now word where whatever scripture it opened to, it was like I would just start reading, like, the page is big. I would just be like, okay, I'm going to start reading here. And then it would be literally something that applied to the situation or to our hearts or our attitude or to guide us. It was unbelievable. And my attorney, who was a non-practicing Jewish man, started going back to the synagogue because of this example that I was being to him. He was like, "You're really encouraging me to get back to my roots and to get back to my faith." So now, throughout this year, he's coming to me. This experience is happening. The Bible is just kind of magically over and over and over again opening to something. I'm bringing this faith element into all of the interactions, which just helped. Even if you don't see the fruits of it happening and manifesting in the natural, it does help to be able to ground yourself on something and to be able to get these words of guidance that you're like, okay, even if it's don't lose faith, don't give up, don't compromise yourself or your values in order to get something that someone's promising you. It's like the devil taking Jesus to the edge of the mountain saying, you could have all this if you just forsake God. And he's like, I already have all this stuff. He's remembering, you forget who I am. I don't forget who I am. And it's like that same concept where we can fall into that pit of believing we don't have the power, believing we don't have, what it takes to get through that, or we're not worthy of it. Or if there's any element of, oh, well, I did do this particular thing wrong or whatever, then I just deserve to lose everything. Like we so easily fall into that trap. And so I was like, we are not falling into that trap. I'm not lying to fix a wrong. That was the number one thing that I just kept saying over and over and over again. I just kept standing on that. And then the day of trial, we had something happen where someone was supposed to come and they were like, look, I want to save face. So if you need me to go in, I'm going to be sitting in the parking lot. You can call me if you need me, but I don't want to go in yet because it will ruin this other relationship I have with this other individual and organization. And I don't want to leave you without the right defense because I know the truth and I'm going to come and speak the truth if you need me. But I also don't want to have to go in there and be associated with it in the event that you don't need me. So that kind of put me in a really weird mindset because I was like, okay, am I going to be able to call you, text you? Hey, come on in here. We need you. Like, I don't know how that's going to work. And so I kind of was like, okay, trying to understand that. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to bring my Bible into the courthouse today. It's one more thing I have to carry, but I want to pray and I want to open it up before we go in. So I literally am like, okay. And the Bible just opened up to another page in my lap. And it was the story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they go into the fire as three and they come out as four. And I had never read that entire story before. Whatever, it's like 5 paragraphs. I had never read all of that. So I didn't understand the power of the story and how these three individuals refused to bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar and they refused to worship his gods, even when they were like, look, we're going to put you in the furnace. We're going to set it 10 times hotter than it normally is. So we're thinking like this is beyond a casual sauna that's going to eventually cook you slowly. This is going to cook you before you even get into the middle of it. So literally, as the guards were bringing them, because there's like chambers, you go through like multiple chambers until you get into the heart of it, the guards were dropping dead from the heat and they weren't even entering the furnace. So they get these three men into the furnace, like, we'll give you one more time to give it up, or you're going in. And they're like, look, God's either going to deliver us or we're going to die on the truth because we don't believe in your gods and we're not bowing down to anybody. So they get in the fire, and the king is outside of the fire, and he sees them. They're not only are they not burning, they're walking around. There's a fourth individual walking around with them and talking to them, ministering to them. And it turns out that this is Jesus. And so four of them walk out. Four of them walk out of the fire. You can call it an angel of, one of an archangel, whatever you want to call it. But people predict that that was Jesus in there with them, walking them out. And so this is this really interesting story that I open up to, and I'm sharing it with my husband. And here we literally are going in with just three of us. We have this one other individual who's going to take the stand with this other individual who said, I'll be here if you need me, kind of a thing. And so I'm like, okay, there's three of us going in. I have to believe that four of us are going to walk out of this fire, not even burned, without a mark. And so that's how I entered that courtroom. I was like, that's just how it's going to be. And then it paid off. So all of these things came to pass. We brought that mentality that we knew our enemy. We knew our enemy as well as we knew us. We knew all of the different, groups of individuals that were involved. So you think about like there isn't just one individual or one group of individuals that are opposing us. There are all these different moving parts, all of these different groups, and we beat all of them. It was one of those instances where I started saying, they're bringing checkers to the table and I'm playing 3D chess. And that's the kind of mindset that you have to have. And that's not making you arrogant or cocky. Don't let that make you arrogant or cocky because then you'll get sloppy. But you've got to be that 3D chess player when you show up to your own situations. And most of the time, people are after that really fast, those fast results, or they think, oh, well, we hold all the power here. So what, you have to cave, you have to bow down. And they really feel like that power or manipulating the appearance of that power is going to put enough fear in you that you're going to cave and they're going to win. And so a lot of these instances, you're going to be up against people who really are just playing checkers. And as long as you're applying these principles, you're going to have a really good chance of navigating these spaces and moving toward those intended outcomes that you want. So this second story comes in years after that first one. And it's just the quick version of it is my husband went into town. We live in a small town. He went into town to a local store to donate something. And he had already been there before, asked the woman if she wanted this. It was a box TV. She sold unique antiques. And so we had this box TV and it was, perfectly good running TV. It's like the technology that they used to make back then, which it would run for 100 years, not like the TVs we have now, which you're lucky if you can get 5 to 7 years life out of it. So we have this TV, he takes it into town, and it turns into an altercation when the shop owner's husband was like, I don't want this. And he was drunk when he came into the shop, and he's like, I don't want your crap, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, forcing my husband to take it back out. Well, in the day that this happened, my husband had flared up gout in his foot. So he's literally walking with a cane. So he's trying to balance this TV when he comes in. As he's walking, hobbling on his swollen feet that are killing him. And he sets the TV down where the clerk tells him to set it down. And then this guy comes in and he's like freaking out. And my husband's like, dude, if you want to carry it back, you can. As they're walking back out to the car, this guy's like a little chihuahua behind him, just like, ah, saying all kind of stuff. I'll spare you the profanity. And then my husband finally is like, why are you being such a jerk about it? He used other words, so I'm censoring it for the, for the audience. And he throws the TV at my husband and he gets out of the way and dodges it. And the next thing you know, he's throwing hands. He does this. He's a martial arts guy. And he's, again, like 17 years younger than my husband. So he's a younger individual in better shape, kicking a guy who's walking with a cane. I just want you to put it in perspective. And the thing is my husband's a very strong individual. He could pulverize this little guy. And he hit him after he kicked his sternum. The guy kicked his sternum. He hit him one time. And then he was like, no, 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 I don't do that anymore. I don't use my hands to solve things. I'm a different person. I'm too old for this crap. And so he's like, I'm not fighting you. He hit him the one time. He did not like the way that felt. And he knew his own strength. And he's like, I'm going to kill this guy or I'm going to hurt him really bad. So he doesn't fight back. So this guy is literally like assaulting him and he's not fighting back. So now eventually the cops come and they arrest my husband based on which they didn't have to arrest anybody, but they arrested my husband falsely based on the husband telling whatever cockamamie story. Didn't matter what everybody else said. And I know what everybody said because I have the body cam footage of all of these individuals being talked to. But he interviews the husband while the wife is standing right there listening to everything. And then he interviews her and she, and he's leading her, is that true? Is that true? And she's saying yes to everything that her husband just said. Now, fast forward, he's in the cop car on the way to the jail. And he says, you're going to feel really stupid when you see the footage from their cameras at the shop, because they have 8 cameras. They would have cameras that caught the actual conversation that started in the store, that went on the sidewalk. And then also the bank right next door had a camera, like the perfect angle to get everything. Even if they didn't get the audio in it, they would have gotten the video. They would have seen that this person feloniously assaulted my husband, not once, but twice with an object and then with his foot before my husband ever made physical contact with him. And when my husband said that in the car, you're going to feel really stupid, the cop went back and told them, do you have cameras? And kind of like tipped them off so that they destroyed the footage. And then he went to the bank the next morning and somehow all of a sudden the bank is not cooperating with the legal situation and not giving the disclosure of the subpoenaed videos. And they're saying they don't have to cooperate and that we can sue them and all this stuff. And we only find out about all of these behind the scene things because this individual who owned the shop is like the busybody of the town, always woes me, woes me. And she's telling people all these details. She's telling people, yeah, the officer came back. And so they hid the camera. They put a flag up in front so that we somehow couldn't see the camera that was out in the front, and just did all this really weird stuff and then made the footage disappear. So we got a lot of information from individuals that had gotten the story from her and all these other details that we had gotten also. So we had, as we're building this case, we are learning about these individuals more than we knew going into it. We're getting all of these different aspects. And of course, it's secondhand, but all of these things were lining up and allowing us to have a better understanding of what we were up against. So we used all of these different things to get to know our enemy. And this helped us tremendously. Again, they're playing checkers and we're playing chess. We're not even playing the same game. And so now here we find ourselves in the same court. We had another interaction with them. I'll spare you. I'll probably talk about that interaction with the mortgage company going bankrupt another time. But we had a fresh experience with some very corrupt activities going on in the courthouse when it came to our home. And so now here we are, like less than a year later, our name's still fresh on their tongues, and here we are again in the court. And right away, they're trying to push him into a plea deal. We've got you, blah, 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 blah. And we're like, nah, we don't lie to get out of trouble. That's not how God helps us. So we're going to have to go with no. Sounds like a you problem that the judge doesn't like things to go to trial, but we're not signing a plea deal. We're not accepting this or that. You actually have the wrong person. You have the wrong story. And they even, from the very beginning, try to pressure my husband by refusing to give him his Miranda rights. They didn't read him his rights, which apparently now is a thing that they don't have to do, but they refused to give him his rights. So they held him for 72 hours without letting him go before the probate judge to get bail set or to get released or whatever. He has no priors. He's got a squeaky clean record. And I was advocating for him on the outside, again, constantly getting information that I shouldn't have had access to so that I could make informed decisions and I could get on a recorded line over and over and over again and catch the jail refusing to give him his Miranda rights. And so that's other things that are to our advantage. Why are they refusing to give him his Miranda rights? Why are they giving him the treatment, which I didn't find out until after they finally released him to the hospital, which is a whole other story. But he was in very bad health shape when he finally was let go in the hospital. And it was just, it was crazy. It's the kind of stuff that you couldn't make up. So here now, fast forward, we're going through the trial or the pretrial stuff, and they're just keeping trying to get us to take a plea deal. Now, what you don't know, what I forgot to mention, was when we got the disclosure of the body cam videos, they strategically censored out everything that happened from the time he walked up with my husband to the intake guards at the jail. So these weird questions that they asked my husband, very racially motivated, these weird things that they were doing, the treatment that already started. So I don't know if the cop gave him a code when he called over, like we got a special one, he needs the special treatment. I don't know. It was very weird because I know people who are guards at that jail and other jails, and they're like, that's not normal procedure. And I thought, good, because it shouldn't be normal procedure to put individuals through these little nuanced abuses. So now we get the videos and that's censored out. And my attorney asks the prosecutor, why are, so many parts of the videos missing? And of course, they're missing because the prosecution thought, well, you don't need to see that. And it's not up to the prosecution to decide what disclosure you can and can't get or what you think you need and don't need. They're supposed to give you all of it. And then you sift through, it's part of the evidence. You sift through and you figure it out. But because the officer went to the scene of the crime and tipped off the individuals and they destroyed evidence because whatever, we don't know. What did he say on camera that had to be stricken from the record? But when we go to the pretrial and we say, hey, we need another pretrial date because we didn't get all of disclosure, they give us another date. This happened several times where we go and the prosecution never gave us the disclosure and they still tried to push it to trial. It's like, this is crazy. You can't go to trial without giving us those tapes. And the tapes still existed, but they wouldn't give them to us. So till the end, they refused to give us that disclosure. So now I'm like, okay, they're playing dirty and I'm still not going to cave. I'm there advocating for my husband. I'm like, you're not caving. You're not taking a plea deal. You're not admitting any guilt in this situation. Someone assaulted you. He should have gone to jail. He should be on trial right now. And he's this guy who used to be that way to his wife. So it was like regular kind of behavior, physically and verbally abusive. So that he flipped that script was just incredible. But, that's the power of when you have all these different forces of evil working against you, those can kind of run away with themselves. And if you let it, it will bury you. So then in all of this, we're waiting for another pretrial date. And my husband gets diagnosed with throat cancer. So now he has to go through 8 weeks plus of chemo, radiation, and all the stuff prior to that, getting his port put in, and then the recovery. And he's a mess after his treatments end. And so we have to get an adjournment to do that. And in the interim, so when I talk about sometimes timing, sometimes you'll get that blessing, that's timing and different things. So all of this dirty stuff behind the scenes, there's other details that I'm just going to leave out because it doesn't matter. It's just one thing after the other, just these little underhanded tactics. And it was the same kind of tactics that I was familiar with the first case and other instances that we've had to deal with the same group of individuals. And now this guy who assaulted my husband, who was trying to say he was the victim in this situation, had screwed over a couple of individuals in the meantime, ripped someone off for like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a contract project and skipped town. So we know he skipped town. He's nowhere to be found. So now the prosecution doesn't even have a witness. They can't find this guy. This guy's in hiding because he owes a couple of people collectively over $500,000. So now they don't have a witness. And they're still bringing their tactics. So here now my husband is going before the judge to get the case dismissed because they don't have a case. They never had a case to begin with, but the only thing that they were trying to build this on was that they have this one witness. So it's his word against my husband's word. And now he's not there. So they don't have a case. So instead of just dismissing it, the prosecutor keeps coming back and giving our attorney plea bargain terms. And the last one was, I want you to take these anger management classes, like 26 weeks of anger management classes. And that's at your expense. That's a lot of weeks of anger management and 12 hours of community service. So these were the two big things that they wanted him to do. And he's like, okay, A, I'm not guilty. B, you don't have a case. You don't have a witness. You have zero evidence. And like, no, that's not happening. I'm not pleading out to something, to a case that you just need to dismiss. And they literally kept coming back and forth, and they still even use that same rhetoric, which was, the judge doesn't like it when we try to go to trial. And it's like, well, you can try to go to trial and you can go before the judge. Like, you can do whatever you want. We still stand where we stand. This experience was incredible to go through a second time. It almost felt like it was almost the same exact playbook, but with a couple of new faces in it as well. So a couple of old faces, a couple of new faces in it, but the same kind of plays, the same kind of tactics. And I had far less dread, even though it was a higher stakes case, and far less fear and even stress and anxiety and all those things and doubt. I was like, I know how this is going to play out, and I just have to keep playing my part, and I have to do these things behind the scenes exceptionally well. I have to be the most informed person in this room about every single moving part, including what the law is. So when my lawyer's telling me this and that and explaining it, I'm learning it. I'm understanding it so that I can apply it, so that I know, okay, if I pull out this detail, this is what he can do with it. So I am being the most educated person in the room about every aspect of this so that I can be a powerful force on this team, because it's my future. It's my life that's on the line here. It's my loved one who risks having these false accusations become something that haunts him forever on his record. And there's nothing more disheartening than playing against people who are not playing on a fair field. They are changing the rules. They are cheating. It's like, when you play a game with somebody who's cheating and they're only winning because they're cheating, it's like, it's an awful feeling. It's irritating, but it's disheartening when you think about it happening in a criminal law. This false arrest concept comes into play in a much larger way a couple years ago. So about a year after my husband's charges were dropped, I get this amazing opportunity to co-author this book for an individual who was falsely arrested and imprisoned for 3.5 years awaiting his trial. And he was innocent. And when he reached out to me and said, are you interested in taking on this project? I need a writer. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, I totally believe you're innocent. And I can't wait to get at the finer details of that so I can help you show the world your story and show them that you were innocent and all of the ways that you were wronged. And I just knew, I believed, like, wow, I'm going to get to do this because this was a high profile case. And there's trial transcripts and newspaper clippings and interviews and all of these things that are like that exist, where people are putting on record, in public record, this is what I said, this is what I did. And it doesn't get any better than that. We're in the pre-launch phase right now, where the book's coming out in about a month and a half. And the book is USA versus Raj. And it really is one of those instances where I got to also see how someone else had this extreme amount of patience and faith and groundedness in their self, in their self-worth, and their confidence, even in the face of all of this darkness and all of this gloom. And to watch them utilize these very similar strategic planning and actions, and how those beat the feds at their own game, where they were playing to win at any cost, regardless of the injustices that came about. So it was really amazing to be able to work on this project and to see somebody else on a much larger scale use these same strategies and have the same effect, because it's powerful. It works. And Sometimes it's just a matter of like, I will not cave. And of course, someone can wear you down to the point where you lose your life and, maybe you just can't handle the pressure. I'm not even saying like that's not a possibility. My client's a multimillionaire, so he had the resources to get the right legal representation. If he had had public defenders for 3.5 years on the outside trying to advocate for him, like he wouldn't have had the same defense. He wouldn't have been able to tell people, no, we are going to find that truth. We are going to expose this folly, expose these lies. We are going to do all these things. I'm not caving. But his health even took some very serious turns to where his loved ones and his attorneys weren't sure if he was going to survive and make it through trial. I mean, think about it. He was in jail for 1,301 days, an 80-year-old man. Just put that in perspective. Just wrap your head around that. So when you're having a bad day and you're thinking, "Oh my God, these situations, how am I going to get through these situations?" Think about Raj. He was in jail for 1,301 days, never losing hope, never stopping to fight for himself, never trying to find that angle, figure out the strategies of his enemies so that he can defeat them, when there was constant folly and constant like corruption, turn after turn after turn. So, yes, sometimes the situation is super stressful and super messy, and you really are interacting with enemies, people who are awful and wishing awful things on you for whatever their motives are. It doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter to try to like figure out what those motives are to help you have an advantage because you're dealing with them, but their motives don't really justify the awful things that they're doing to you. But while your own stressful situations and interactions with enemies in your camp may not be this kind of high stakes like these examples, I share them with you to encourage you that even in the darkest of dark hours, it is possible to keep hope and faith as you do the strategic work. And it's hard work sometimes to overcome your adversaries and obstacles and always looking toward that intended outcome. Like I have said in so many episodes before today, you have to be fully aware of what you hope to get out of the situation that you're in and out of your life. So, like each situation is just one small, little, tiny step or little piece in a much larger picture. So, you have to have a focus and a perspective on this now moment and what you hope to come in the immediate future. And then you have to have a focus on the future, what's on the horizon there. And that might change and that might shift, but you also have to keep adjusting that perspective and adjusting what your motives and desired outcomes are. That's something that's continually a work in progress. But until you readjust things, you have to hold steadfast to what you say you want. And you have to do all of the things that bring that around. There's no shortcuts. There's no compromising on yourself. And when you do fall short, you need to be able to forgive yourself, pick yourself back up, and get back at it. You have the strategies. And when you try things that don't work, you make a note of it. Again, you're still analyzing yourself all the time. You've got the most intel on yourself. You have to be willing to look back and say that works or that didn't work that time. It doesn't mean it would never work, but maybe it just didn't work in that situation or that type of situation or with that caliber of characters that are in that situation. Maybe it will work in other situations. You've got to do all of that work also, that analysis work that comes in after the fact, or sometimes right in real time when you're going through a situation where you're adjusting and noting like, that didn't come off, or that didn't get the answer that I thought it was going to get, or that didn't move things the way I thought it was going to move it. And then you adjust and you stop things when you start to see them getting out. You don't have to let something just completely roll off the edge of the cliff and then the whole thing's a lost cause. You have power to do particular things because you're worth it. What you want out of life is worth it, and you've got to keep remembering that. And your confidence is grounded to that. These principles really do sharpen your focus also, and they allow you to fully understand these other people's emotions, motives, biases, beliefs, and the behaviors that stem out of these things. So the ways that they think, and then the ways that they act and react in situations, all of this is like principles and perspectives that really enhance your focus and your ability to navigate these spaces. So if you think about, none of it is lost effort. because it's helping you not only navigate these situations, it's also helping you understand the human condition better. It's helping you understand people outside of the situation. So if you are in situations where you have to deal with these individuals repeatedly, maybe these situations will go differently. And again, not everybody's an adversary. Don't lose your focus here to think, oh my gosh, everybody is the enemy here. I have to think about the enemies in my camp. You're just applying that principle where you're getting to know other people so that you can predict their next steps and their actions, and what might be motivating those next steps and actions is how you're going to arrive at this thinking. You can't skip steps and snap your finger and think things are just going to, snap into place. Although the more you practice these things, the quicker you get at them, especially applying them in real time. It's not going to take you, a half hour or 15 minutes or 5 minutes. Sometimes you get that in 30 or 60 seconds, and enough time to adjust your thinking and say the right thing immediately in response to that person. So it's like practicing these things, you get better, you get stronger, you get faster, to where you're almost operating like an improv artist, where you're like, okay, change that. Okay, you recalibrate my thinking in real time, and boom, and then I can react accordingly. And here's the biggest takeaway I want you to have today. When we work to live beyond simply surviving our interactions that fill our time and shape our life, we really do thrive. And in doing so, we become a force to reckon with.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.